After 15 years of service as a Navy SEAL, I wanted nothing more than peace. The constant deployments, the missions that kept me awake at night, and the brothers I had lost along the way had taken their toll. Sarah and I purchased our home in Oak Ridge Estates 3 years ago. It was everything we had dreamed about during my time overseas. A two-story colonial with a wraparound porch, large oak trees providing shade in the summer, and enough space in the backyard for the children we hope to have someday. I spent months renovating every square inch of our property. The kitchen now featured handcrafted maple cabinets I had built myself. The backyard held a garden where Sarah planted vegetables and flowers. On the walls hung photographs from my service days, alongside pictures of our wedding and family gatherings. This was not just a house. This was our sanctuary after years of sacrifice. The neighborhood seemed perfect at first. American flags flew from several porches, including ours. Neighbors brought casseroles when we moved in. The Homeowners Association maintained the community pool, playground, and common areas with reasonable annual dues. Sarah joined the neighborhood book club while I volunteered to help elderly residents with home repairs. Things began to change 6 months ago when elections brought new leadership to the HOA board. Leonard Kravitz, a former real estate developer with slick-back hair and a perpetual scowl, became president. His first official act was to increase dues by 40% for enhanced community services. Most residents grumbled but paid. The first violation notice appeared on our door 3 weeks later. Our trash cans had remained visible from the street for more than 12 hours after collection. The fine was $50. I paid it and made sure to bring the cans in earlier. 2 weeks after that, another notice claimed our grass exceeded the allowable height by half an inch. Another $50. Then came citations for unapproved holiday decorations, a garden hose visible from the street, and a bird bath installed without proper approval. Each notice carried increasingly steep penalties. When I reviewed the HOA covenant, I discovered many of these rules did not actually exist in our contract. Something felt wrong about the entire situation. My military training had taught me to recognize patterns of intimidation, and this felt methodical rather than random enforcement. At the monthly community barbecue, I noticed subtle changes in behavior among our neighbors. Margaret Wilson, who usually chatted enthusiastically about her grandchildren, avoided eye contact. The Johnsons hurried past with quick nods instead of stopping to talk. Whispered conversations halted when Sarah or I approached. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, a black SUV with tinted windows and community security, painted on the door, drove slowly past our house for the third time that day. The vehicle had appeared in the neighborhood shortly after the new board took control. The driver wore what looked like a police uniform, but something about it seemed off. The badges were similar to law enforcement but not identical. "Have you noticed people acting strange lately?" Sarah asked, sipping her iced tea. "Yes, and those security patrols were never mentioned in any HOA meeting," I replied. That night, another envelope appeared, this one thicker than previous notices. Inside was a formal warning letter with a list of violations totaling over $1,000. The letterhead displayed an official-looking seal and threatening language about enforcement measures for noncompliance. My stomach tightened as I read the document. This was no longer about maintaining property values. Something more sinister was developing in our once peaceful neighborhood. The violations continued to pile up, each more absurd than the last. Our mailbox, which had been the standard color since we moved in, suddenly violated Section 8.3 of a covenant appendix I had never seen. The American flag on our porch was 2 inches larger than regulations allowed. The flowers Sarah had planted were not from the approved vegetation list. Even the welcome mat at our front door received a citation for unapproved messaging. Each notice arrived in official-looking envelopes with increasingly aggressive language. The fines now totaled nearly $3,000 with threats of property liens if left unpaid. I tried the diplomatic approach first, as my military training had taught me that direct confrontation should always be the last resort. I scheduled a meeting with Leonard Kravitz at the HOA office, bringing copies of our original covenant documents and photographs, documenting our compliance with actual regulations. The office itself had changed. What once was a small desk in the community center had become an elaborate space with security cameras and a receptionist behind bulletproof glass. "Mr. Kravitz is very busy today. You have 5 minutes," the receptionist said without looking up from her computer. Leonard sat behind an oversized desk, his fingers forming a steeple as he listened to my concerns with a practiced expression of boredom. His suit appeared expensive, far more costly than what managing a suburban HOA should afford. "The rules are the rules, Mr. Miller," he said when I finished presenting my evidence. "The board has authority to update regulations as community needs evolve. Perhaps if maintaining a proper residence is too difficult for you, Oak Ridge Estates may not be the right fit for your lifestyle." These changes were never put to a community vote as required by state law, I replied, maintaining my composure despite the condescension in his voice. "I suggest you consult Section 12 of the Emergency Powers Clause. Good day." He dismissed me with a wave. No such clause existed in our documents. That evening, I filed formal appeals against each violation and sent registered letters to the county recorder's office requesting validation of the HOA's authority. My military career had taught me the importance of proper channels and documentation. The following weekend, I attended a neighborhood potluck at the community center. While serving myself potato salad, I overheard whispered conversations about other residents facing similar harassment. The elderly couple on Maple Street had received over $5,000 in fines for landscaping violations, despite having the same garden for 20 years. A single mother on Oak Avenue faced eviction proceedings over unpaid fines for excessive noise from her children playing in their own backyard. "They targeted the Wilsons first," Mrs. Rodriguez whispered when she noticed me listening. 3 months of violations until they sold for 30% below market value. Guess who bought the property? A company called Oak Ridge Investments. 3 guesses who owns that company. "Kravitz," I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded, then quickly walked away as one of the security guards entered the room. The guard wore a uniform nearly identical to county police, complete with a utility belt holding what appeared to be a taser and handcuffs. He was not a certified law enforcement officer. I recognized the distinctive stance of private security contractors I had encountered overseas. These were hired muscle masquerading as official authority. That night, I began serious research. Using skills honed through military intelligence training, I discovered Oak Ridge Investments had purchased 14 properties in our neighborhood over the past year, all following aggressive HOA enforcement actions. Further digging revealed similar patterns in 2 other communities where Leonard had previously served on HOA boards. Public records showed connections between Kravitz and several shell companies involved in real estate development. The pieces were falling into place. This was a systematic scheme to force out homeowners and acquire properties at depressed prices. I created a detailed log documenting each interaction with the HOA. I installed security cameras around our property and began recording all conversations with board members. Sarah followed my lead, learning how to document evidence properly using techniques I had learned during my service. "Do you think they will back off if they know we are documenting everything?" she asked as we reviewed footage one evening. "Number men like Kravitz only respect force, but we need to be smart about this, build our case properly." The next morning, another envelope arrived. This one contained not just violations but a direct threat. Compliance with all community standards must be achieved within 72 hours, or enforcement action will commence. Attached was a notice claiming our security cameras violated privacy regulations and must be removed immediately. That evening, I taught Sarah how to use our security system to back up footage to an off-site server. Neither of us realized how crucial that preparation would soon become. The business trip could not have come at a worse time. An old military buddy needed consultation on a security system for his new business 3 states away. The job would take only 2 days, but with tensions escalating in the neighborhood, I felt uneasy about leaving Sarah alone. "I can reschedule," I offered as I packed my overnight bag that morning. Sarah shook her head. "No, we cannot let them disrupt our lives completely. Besides, I have the security system, and Mrs. Rodriguez next door promised to check in." The morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains as I kissed Sarah goodbye. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight, creating a halo effect that made my heart ache with love and concern. "Call me if anything happens, no matter how small," I insisted. "Stop worrying so much. What could possibly happen in broad daylight in a suburban neighborhood?" she smiled, brushing my cheek with her hand. I left at 7 that morning. By noon, I had landed and was meeting with my friend about his security needs. At 3:15, everything changed. Sarah was watering plants in our sunroom when 2 black SUVs with neighborhood security markings pulled into our driveway. 3 men in tactical-style uniforms approached our front door. Through our security camera feed, I would later watch as they pounded aggressively, standing in formation like a police raid rather than community representatives. Sarah opened the door but kept the security chain engaged, just as we had practiced. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a crew cut and mirrored sunglasses, thrust a document toward the gap in the door. "Mandatory property inspection. Open up immediately." "May I see some identification and proper documentation authorizing this inspection?" Sarah replied, following the script we had rehearsed for such situations. The man's jaw tightened. "This is all the authorization we need. HOA Regulations Section 14 permits emergency inspections when violations remain uncorrected. I need to see proper legal warrants before allowing entry. Please leave those documents in the mailbox, and my husband will review them when he returns tomorrow." The leader leaned closer to the door. "Listen, lady, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your cameras need to come down today, and we are here to remove them. Open the door." "I do not consent to this entry. Please leave my property now." Sarah attempted to close the door completely. What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. The largest man slammed his shoulder against the door, breaking the security chain. Sarah stumbled backward as the 3 men forced their way inside. She reached for her phone on the entryway table. "Call 911. She shouted toward our smart speaker device as she backed away from the intruders. "Disable that," the leader barked, and one of the men ripped our speaker from its power source. Sarah managed to grab her cell phone and dial 911, but before she could speak, one of the men knocked it from her hand. The phone skidded across our hardwood floor, the call connecting as it came to rest against the wall. "You have no legal right to be in our home," Sarah stated firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "We have every right. This is HOA business." The leader nodded to his companions. "Secure the subject while we remove the cameras." Two men grabbed Sarah's arms as she struggled against them. When she kicked one in the shin, their response was swift and brutal. A calculated punch to her midsection doubled her over. As she gasped for breath, they delivered precise strikes to her ribcage. Not wild, angry hits, but methodical blows designed to cause maximum internal damage while minimizing visible bruising. These were not untrained thugs, but individuals with tactical combat training. Sarah screamed as she felt ribs crack under the assault. She collapsed to the floor as they continued their attack. Through the haze of pain, she heard the distant sound of the 911 operator asking for information. The men seemed unconcerned about the active call, suggesting they had confidence in avoiding consequences. "Make sure she understands what happens when people refuse to comply," the leader said coldly as they finally stepped away from her crumpled form. The men calmly removed our security cameras, took the memory cards from our devices, and walked out, leaving the front door open and Sarah struggling to breathe on the floor. The entire confrontation lasted less than 15 minutes. Emergency services arrived 20 minutes later after the 911 dispatcher heard Sarah's labored breathing and moans of pain. The ambulance rushed her to Memorial Hospital with multiple fractured ribs, a partially collapsed lung, and internal bleeding. I was still in my meeting when the hospital called. The doctor spoke with clinical detachment about 7 shattered ribs, a pneumothorax requiring chest tube placement, and significant bruising to her spleen and kidneys. They had her stabilized but heavily sedated. The police, he mentioned almost as an afterthought, had taken an initial report but seemed unusually reluctant to investigate what they termed a civil dispute escalation. 4 hours later, I arrived at the hospital, having caught the first available flight home. The sight of Sarah connected to machines, her face pale and breath shallow, burned into my memory in a way no combat scene ever had. A police officer waited outside her room, looking uncomfortable as I approached. "Mr. Miller," he began, notebook in hand, "we understand there was an altercation regarding HOA regulations at your residence." An altercation. My voice remained controlled despite the rage building inside me. 3 men broke into our home and brutally attacked my wife while claiming to represent our homeowners association. The officer avoided eye contact. According to their statement, they were conducting an authorized inspection when Mrs. Miller became combative. They had no legal authority to enter our home. This was breaking and entering, assault and battery at minimum. "Sir, HOA disputes can be complicated legal matters. The security officers are licensed through the county and—" "Show me their law enforcement credentials," I interrupted. "Show me the warrant they presented before entering our home." His silence told me everything I needed to know. The local police had been compromised, either through intimidation or direct payoffs. I would find no justice through official channels. "We will look into it further," he finally said, closing his notebook. "In the meantime, I suggest complying with HOA regulations to avoid further misunderstandings." As he walked away, I turned back to Sarah's room, my military training already calculating a different approach to justice. These men had attacked not just my wife but my home, my sanctuary. They had no idea what forces they had just unleashed. I sat motionless in the hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of machines monitoring my wife the only sound breaking the silence. Sarah lay unconscious, her body so broken that even with the sheet pulled up to her shoulders, I could see the unnatural way her ribcage moved with each shallow breath. The chest tube protruding from her side drained fluid that should never leave the body. Her face, normally vibrant and expressive, appeared waxy and still under the harsh fluorescent lights. For 6 hours, I remained in that chair, my body present while my mind shifted into a state I had not accessed since my last deployment. This was not panic or blind rage. This was the cold, calculated focus that had kept me alive during operations in hostile territory. My training had prepared me to compartmentalize emotion and channel it into methodical action. I would need every bit of that discipline now. When Sarah briefly regained consciousness that evening, her first words cut through me like shrapnel. They said, "This is what happens when people do not comply," she whispered before the pain medication pulled her back under. Dr. Patterson entered the room as the night shift began. He checked Sarah's vitals before addressing me directly. "The damage is severe but targeted," he explained, showing me the X-rays. 7 ribs fractured in specific locations, partially collapsed left lung, contusions to kidneys and spleen. These injuries are not random. Whoever did this knew exactly how to cause maximum internal damage while minimizing external evidence. "Will she recover fully?" I asked, my voice steady despite the hurricane building inside me. "With time and physical therapy, yes, but recovery will be painful and lengthy. 6 to 8 weeks before she can perform basic functions independently." He hesitated before adding, "The officer mentioned this was related to an HOA dispute." "That is what they want everyone to believe." "I have worked emergency medicine for 20 years, Mr. Miller. These injuries are consistent with targeted physical assault by trained individuals, not an argument over lawn ornaments that got out of hand." As he left, I noticed 2 uniformed officers speaking with the floor nurse. They glanced repeatedly in my direction, their body language suggesting they were monitoring rather than protecting. The system that should provide justice was already positioning itself against us. I waited until visiting hours ended before leaving the hospital. The drive home revealed a police cruiser following at a discreet distance. They were watching me, which meant they feared what I might do. They were right to worry. Our front door remained partially open from the break-in. Inside, the evidence of violence was everywhere. Blood spattered the hardwood floor where Sarah had fallen. Boot prints tracked through the entryway. The security system had been dismantled, wires hanging uselessly from the wall. In our bedroom, drawers had been emptied, personal documents scattered across the floor. This had not been merely about removing security cameras. They had searched our home while Sarah lay bleeding. I methodically documented everything with my phone camera, measuring boot prints with a ruler in frame for scale reference. My SEAL training and evidence collection guided each photograph and note. The most telling evidence appeared in our home office. The only items missing were our external hard drives containing security footage and copies of HOA correspondence. This was not random theft but targeted removal of evidence. They had made a critical error, however. Our cloud backup system had transmitted footage until the moment they disabled it. The evidence still existed. I transformed our guest bedroom into an operations center within hours. Computer monitors displayed neighborhood layouts, property records, and personnel files I had compiled on HOA board members. My military laptop, secured with encryption that would challenge government agencies, became command central for what would become a comprehensive intelligence operation. Sleep was not an option that night. I reviewed the security footage repeatedly, capturing clear images of the 3 men who had attacked Sarah. Using facial recognition software from my private security consulting business, I identified two of them as former military contractors with histories of misconduct in Iraq and Afghanistan. The leader remained unidentified in official databases, suggesting redacted service records or identity manipulation. Public records searches revealed the pattern more clearly now. Leonard Kravitz had connections to development companies that had systematically targeted 3 different communities in the past 5 years. The method was identical each time: infiltrate HOA boards, implement draconian rules, target vulnerable homeowners with excessive fines, force property sales at depressed values, then redevelop for massive profits. The connection to organized crime appeared in land transaction records. Shell companies linked to known associates of regional crime families purchased properties after HOA foreclosures. The operation was sophisticated money laundering disguised as community development. Most disturbing was the evidence of police complicity. Campaign donation records showed significant contributions to the county sheriff from development companies connected to Kravitz. Incident reports from other homeowners documenting intimidation had been systematically downgraded or dismissed entirely. By dawn, my eyes burned from hours at the computer, but the battlefield had become clear. This was not just about Sarah or our home anymore. This was systematic corruption targeting an entire community, with vulnerable residents as collateral damage in a real estate scheme. I opened a locked gun case hidden in our closet wall safe. The M4 carbine inside, legally owned and properly registered, had accompanied me on numerous operations. I removed it carefully, checking the mechanism before returning it to storage. It would remain there until absolutely necessary, but its presence represented a final option I hoped not to require. My phone chimed with a text message as sunlight began filtering through the blinds. The hospital. Sarah was awake and asking for me. As I prepared to leave, another notification appeared. A new email from the HOA with final notice in the subject line. Opening it revealed an eviction notice claiming our property would be seized in 7 days for non-payment of fines now totaling over $20,000. They had escalated beyond intimidation to outright theft of our home, while Sarah lay hospitalized from their assault. My hand trembled slightly as I closed the email, not from fear, but from the cold certainty of what must now follow. I had fought against insurgents and terrorists who threatened American lives abroad. I never expected to face a similar battle in suburban America. As I drove to the hospital, I noticed the security SUVs parked near our home, watching my departure. Let them watch, I thought. They had targeted the wrong household. They had attacked a SEALs family, not understanding that the training that made us effective overseas did not disappear when we returned home. This was now an asymmetric conflict on domestic soil, and I would apply every lesson learned through years of specialized warfare. The final piece fell into place when I received a text message from the hospital. Sarah was being discharged tomorrow, earlier than medically advisable. Someone had applied pressure to free up her bed. The system was moving against us on all fronts. It was time to call for reinforcements. For the first week after Sarah returned home, our days fell into a careful rhythm. Mornings began with pain medication and gentle stretching exercises. Midday brought doctor-prescribed physical therapy that left her exhausted but determined. Evenings were for rest and recovery. I transformed our living room into a makeshift recovery suite so she would not need to navigate stairs. My entire focus appeared to be on her rehabilitation and comfort. Behind this facade of the devoted husband, I executed a carefully orchestrated strategic plan during the precious hours when Sarah slept. The methodical approach that had made me effective in military operations guided my every action. The pain is manageable, Sarah insisted one afternoon, though the tightness around her eyes told me otherwise. What are we going to do about them? Focus on healing, I replied, adjusting her pillows. Everything else is being handled. I know that look, James. You are planning something. I kissed her forehead gently. Rest now, trust me. When she drifted to sleep that night, I retreated to our operations room. The first phase of my plan involved reaching out to select former teammates, men who had stood beside me in the worst combat situations imaginable, men who understood brotherhood extended beyond active service. My first call went to Mike Evans, now working in cybersecurity in Atlanta. Our conversation was brief and coded, using language developed during our deployment together. Family emergency, domestic hostile, system compromised. No further explanation was needed. We had served together for 8 years, saving each other's lives multiple times. His response was immediate. Assets available, location secure, timeline. 7-day window, surveillance in place, digital package required. Understood, arriving tomorrow, will establish baseline. Similar calls went out to 5 other former team members. None asked unnecessary questions. When a brother called, you responded. Within 24 hours, they began arriving in our community under various covers: a cable technician, a landscape service, a home inspector, visitors staying with existing residents. Each brought specialized skills that had once been deployed against America's enemies overseas. While Sarah slept and recovered, a sophisticated counterintelligence operation took shape around our neighborhood. Surveillance cameras were discreetly installed in public areas. Communication networks were established using encrypted channels. Intelligence gathering began on HOA security movements and personnel. Mike discovered that the HOA had massively overextended its legal authority. The covenant documents filed with the county differed substantially from those being enforced. Financial records showed suspicious transfers between HOA accounts and offshore entities. The security force operated without proper licensing, using falsified credentials to present themselves as law enforcement. Most damning was evidence that property values were being artificially depressed through coordinated action. Homes acquired through HOA foreclosures were being transferred to development companies at 30% below market value, then rezoned for commercial use worth 3 times the residential value. I prepared documentation packages for multiple federal agencies: FBI, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, Department of Housing and Urban Development. Each package contained evidence of specific violations within that agency's jurisdiction. These would serve as our insurance policy if direct action became necessary. While this operation progressed, the HOA escalated their pressure. Daily notices appeared on our door demanding immediate payment of fabricated fines. Security vehicles maintained constant presence on our street. Neighbors were instructed to report any unusual activity at our home. Black SUVs followed me whenever I left to pick up medications or supplies. One morning, Sarah found a note slipped under our door while I was showering. Final opportunity to vacate peacefully. Medical incidents can happen repeatedly. The implied threat against her still healing body sent a surge of cold fury through me. I shredded the note before Sarah could see my reaction, but she knew me too well. They threatened me again, she stated rather than asked. They did. Are we in danger? I sat beside her on the couch, taking her hand gently to avoid jostling her healing ribs. Not anymore. Everything is in place. That night, Mike brought the final surveillance report. The HOA security force had increased to 12 personnel, all with military contractor backgrounds. They had acquired additional vehicles and communications equipment. Most concerning, they now carried concealed firearms despite lacking proper licensing. "They are planning something significant," Mike noted, showing me movement patterns tracked over the past 5 days. "All indicators suggest a direct action within 48 hours. "Then we accelerate," I replied, pulling out the contingency plans we had developed. The next morning, a letter arrived by certified mail. Not on HOA letterhead, but from a law firm representing Oak Ridge Investments. It claimed immediate eviction proceedings had been approved by a county judge, with physical removal scheduled for 7:00 a.m. the following day. The document appeared official, complete with a judge's signature and court seal. My legal contact confirmed what I suspected. The documents were sophisticated forgeries. No such order had been filed with the actual court. They were attempting to create the appearance of legal authority for what would be an illegal forced eviction. That evening, as Sarah rested, I briefed the team assembled in our garage. Former SEALs, communication specialists, and tactical experts reviewed the operation plan one final time. Equipment checks were conducted with the same precision we had once applied before missions in hostile territory. "Rules of engagement are strict," I reminded them. "Non-lethal response only unless direct threat to life is established. Primary objective is containment and documentation for federal prosecution." "What about the M4?" asked Kevin, eyeing the locked case. "Vehicle disablement only if they attempt to flee. Precision fire, no personnel targets unless absolutely necessary for protection of life." As the meeting concluded, my phone chimed with a message from our surveillance team. 3 additional security vehicles had arrived at the HOA office. Equipment being unloaded suggested preparation for a substantial operation. The timeline had accelerated. I returned to the living room where Sarah was attempting to stand unassisted for the first time since the attack. Her determination showed in every careful movement and controlled breath. "Tomorrow?" she asked, reading my expression. "Tomorrow," I confirmed. "The team is ready. Are you certain you want to stay? The safe house is still an option." She straightened as much as her healing ribs allowed, her eyes reflecting the same strength that had first drawn me to her years ago. "This is our home. I am not running." As darkness fell, security vehicles began positioning at strategic points around our neighborhood. Outside our window, I could see the outline of an SUV parked at the corner, headlights dark but engine occasionally running to maintain power. They were preparing for morning action, unaware that they were under more sophisticated surveillance than they could imagine. I received a final text message from our perimeter team: "Assets in position, awaiting your signal." The HOA forces were moving into place for what they believed would be a simple intimidation and eviction. Instead, they were walking into a carefully orchestrated operation designed by men who had conducted similar missions against genuine terrorist cells. The difference was now we were protecting our homes rather than foreign objectives. As Sarah drifted to sleep that night, I kissed her forehead gently. "Tomorrow it ends," I promised. Whether through legal means or direct action would depend entirely on the choices made by those who had brought this conflict to our doorstep. Dawn broke with the soft orange glow that makes suburban neighborhoods appear peaceful and idyllic. The air hung heavy with morning dew as birds began their daily chorus. On any other day, the scene outside our home would suggest nothing but tranquility. Today was different. Today had been carefully choreographed for weeks. At precisely 6:15 a.m., 5 black SUVs with tinted windows turned onto our street in formation. They moved with practiced precision, creating a perimeter before coming to a synchronized stop. From my position at the upstairs window, I watched through military-grade binoculars as 15 men exited the vehicles. Most wore tactical gear with community security emblazoned across their chests. 2 carried document folders. All moved with the practiced formation of men with military or law enforcement background. Leonard Kravitz emerged from the lead vehicle, standing back as his security team took position. He appeared smug, checking his watch as though timing a well-rehearsed performance. His presence confirmed this was no routine enforcement but a personal matter. Through my earpiece, I heard Mike's voice from his surveillance position. Primary target on scene with 14 tangos, all armed with concealed sidearms. No visible long guns. 3 teams of 5 approaching from different angles. All units maintain position. Wait for my signal, I responded, voice calm despite the adrenaline beginning to flow. This was familiar territory, the focused clarity before mission execution that every SEAL recognizes. Sarah sat in her wheelchair in our living room, positioned safely away from windows, but able to monitor the security feed on a tablet. Her face showed no fear, only the determined expression I had seen countless times during her recovery sessions. "Remember the plan," I told her, checking my watch. "No matter what happens, stay inside until Mike gives the all-clear." "I remember. Be careful," she replied, squeezing my hand. At 6:30 a.m. precisely, hard knocking echoed through our home. Through the security monitor, I watched 3 men standing at our front door, the same 3 who had attacked Sarah weeks earlier. The leader held what appeared to be official eviction documents. I descended the stairs slowly, dressed in casual clothes with nothing to suggest preparation for conflict. The weight of my concealed sidearm pressed against my lower back, a contingency I hoped would not be necessary. Opening the door partway, I faced the men who had broken my wife's body and violated our home. "James Miller," the leader asked with artificial formality. "Yes." He thrust papers toward me. "By order of the county court, you are being evicted from this property for failure to comply with community regulations and non-payment of assessed fines. You have 30 minutes to remove essential belongings before the property is secured." I examined the documents with deliberate slowness, noting the forged judge's signature I had been briefed to expect. "May I have 10 minutes to gather some medications and clothes?" I asked, adopting a defeated tone. The request clearly surprised them. They had expected resistance, perhaps even hoped for it to justify escalation. My apparent compliance disrupted their script. "10 minutes, that is all," the leader agreed with suspicious eyes. I closed the door and moved to our kitchen, where I pressed a hidden switch beneath the counter 3 times. This simple action activated the operation that had been meticulously planned over weeks. Across the neighborhood, synchronized responses began. Former SEAL teammates who had been positioned in strategic locations for days initiated coordinated movements. 2 had established observation posts disguised as utility workers servicing electrical lines. 3 more had integrated with sympathetic neighbors, staying as relatives visiting from out of town. Others had maintained rotating surveillance from rental properties obtained specifically for this operation. I moved upstairs to retrieve the locked case containing my M4 carbine. The weapon represented a final option, one I had specifically prepared for vehicle disablement rather than personnel engagement. After ensuring it was properly configured, I took position at a pre-designated window with clear lines of sight to all 5 SUVs. Outside, the HOA security team grew restless as their 10-minute countdown approached 7 minutes. Through my earpiece, Mike confirmed all team members were in position. Federal agents who had been briefed on our evidence had also staged nearby, waiting for the predetermined signal. At 8 minutes, the security team's patience expired. The leader signaled his men to approach the house again. This time, they moved with tactical formation, suggesting they anticipated resistance. As they reached our porch, the operation executed with precision timing. From multiple directions, former SEALs emerged from concealed positions. 2 appeared from utility service vehicles parked yesterday. 3 more exited neighboring homes whose residents had suffered similar HOA harassment. Others seemed to materialize from landscaping features and parked cars. The security team froze, suddenly finding themselves surrounded by men who moved with the unmistakable discipline of elite military operators. The confusion on their faces shifted to alarm as they realized they were outmaneuvered and outclassed. Leonard Kravitz, seeing the situation unfolding, rushed toward his vehicle. This was the contingency we had anticipated. As he reached for his car door, I took careful aim with the M4 and executed 6 seconds of precision fire targeting only vehicle systems, radiators, engine blocks, and tire assemblies. The sound echoed through,